Decisions.
Wait a minute. Are you still looking for cars on Carvana?
Yeah, decisions.
When I used Carvana, I found the exact car I was looking for in minutes. Bought it on the spot.
Electric or full diesel? Decisions.
Come on, you've been at it for weeks. Just buy it already.
You're right. Crossover it is. Decisions decided.
Whether you know exactly what you want or like to take your time, buy your car the convenient way with Carvana.
Bada boom, sold.
Huh?
Just sold my car on Carvana. Dropping it off and getting paid today.
Already?
What, you still haven't sold yours? You told me about it months ago.
Is
the offer good?
Oh, the offer's great.
Don't have another car yet?
I could trade it in for this car I love.
Come on, what are we waiting for?
You're right.
Let's go.
Whether you're looking to sell your car right now or just whenever feels right, go to Carvana.com and sell your car the convenient way. Terms and conditions apply.
Want to shop Walmart Black Friday deals first? Walmart Plus members get early access to our hottest deals. Join now and get 50% off a one-year annual membership. Shop Black Friday deals first with Walmart Plus. See terms at walmartplus.com.
Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game with me, Kevin Day, and Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire. Kieran, you tricky rascal. Did you deliberately wait till I was looking down to go 3, 2, 1, go?
Yes, well, bit. Yeah, I was catching up on my numbers, so I was a little bit slow to start off with and had to get to the start at the right point.
Yeah, I've been meaning to talk to you about you and numbers, Kieran. I mean, you need to do a bit of work with your... How are you? Apart from busy, obviously.
I'm good. I've been doing a course today with my very good friend Christina Philippou, and she and I are sort of the Morecambe and Wise of football finance. We wrote the two state of play papers together. So she's gone off to Newcastle to do something with the Football Collective, which sounds very hipster to me.
Does, doesn't it?
And I'm delivering a course in Leicester for the FIFA Masters, which I thought was sort of a bit like the over 45s. Well, it would be an over 45, clearly in my case, but I thought the FIFA Masters was something to do with sort of the old codgers, former players, five-a-side team, but it's not.
No disrespect to Leicester, Kieran, although this will sound disrespectful to Leicester, but what the bloody hell are FIFA doing in Leicester?
I know, yeah. They could have flown me somewhere warm. It was freezing this morning.
It was very cold.
The car.
It's nothing funnier than a black cat on a frosty garden trying to have a wee and get in as quickly as possible. And hang on a second, if you and Christina are the Morecambe and Wise, what does that make us? With a Vic and Bob, perhaps?
Yeah, Mike and Bernie.
Yeah, that's a reference that, again, already the BAFTA's gone. But yeah, it's Newsday, Kieran, and there's some... in fact, the first story is about your new best friend's FIFA, who you're working for tomorrow. Is Gianni turning up at the masterclass in Leicester?
I've not seen him on the list of people enrolled, but he's probably the type of bloke that could rock up and not have to sign in. Yeah, there are those people in life, aren't there?
Yeah, it's unlikely. It doesn't strike me as the sort of man who's across the details. But if he is perusing the stuff in his virtual inbox, and he goes, "Hang on a second, what's this happening?" Maguire, the man has been having a go at me on a twice weekly basis for the last 5 years. I hope we're not paying him, and the good news is they're not.
They're not, absolutely.
But these people that you're working for nothing, Kieran, these wrong-uns, have been accused of breaking their own rules, Kieran.
Yes, this is in respect of everybody's favourite brand new competition, the FIFA Club World Cup. And it turns out that there are 2 clubs from Mexico who have qualified for the finals, Club Leon and Club de Football Pachuca. And it turns out that both of these clubs are owned by the Pachuca Group. Now, under FIFA's rules, and this is something which we've highlighted in the past as being one of our reservations in relation to the FIFA Club World Cup, is in the era of multi-club ownership models, there is a genuine danger that Manchester City could end up with playing Melbourne City or New York City or one of the other members of the club, of the group. And that raises eyebrows in terms of the integrity of results. And when we always go back to the legendary game between West Germany and East Germany and many, many years ago. And
West Germany and Austria.
West Germany and Austria, sorry,
Yep.
West Germany and Austria. And they've got one or two historic links, to put it mildly. So therefore, an objection has been raised by a club in Costa Rica, Liga Deportivo Alajuelense, to say this isn't within the FIFA rulebook. It specifically states that you cannot have a multi-club ownership team, so you have to go and pick the best of those two in terms of where they'd finished in the table and so on. And therefore, we should take their place. Now, given that FIFA are still muttering something along the lines of everybody's going to get $50 million for participation in the tournament, and I don't think that that's effectively your entry fee. You can understand why a team in Costa Rica would want to raise such an objection. It's embarrassing from FIFA's point of view, but embarrassing is one thing. Having shame is another, and FIFA is an organisation which has no shame. I'm not going to go down well in Leicester tomorrow, am I? But
we could wait till Monday and discuss it then, Kieran, if you prefer.
No, let's go for it. They knew what they're letting themselves in for. But it does appear to be a bit of an open shut case. No doubt that there is a way of circumventing this. But fair play to Liga Deportiva Alajuelense for spotting this and bringing it to FIFA's attention. Yeah.
What was the name of the group, Kieran, that owns both clubs?
It is the Pachuca Group. So we've got Club de Football Pachuca, and it turns out that they've also got another team that they own in Chile, and they own Real Oviedo, which are in the Segunda Liga of Spain.
I was hoping you'd just say Pachuca, and I'd say bless you, and then we'd move on. But you saw through it. You say this club in Costa Rica, Kieran, and I can only apologise to everyone in Costa Rica for our pronunciation of your football club's name. You say they spotted this as though it was some kind of error on page 78 of a 4,000-page document. I mean, it's blinding. Everyone will know that club is that those two clubs are owned by the same people. Everyone, it appears, except FIFA. This might be a time. I don't think we've ever actually discussed what the criteria are for being invited to join this tournament. Because already, it didn't occur to me that there would be. Obviously, it's a world competition, so of course there are clubs from Mexico and Costa Rica, but they're going to be the smaller clubs in the tournament, I guess, are they?
They are. I think as far as the European entrants are concerned, it involves having the Champions League winners for the past 3 to 4 years. So that will involve Chelsea, Manchester City and Real Madrid. I would imagine that FIFA would have liked to have crowbarred Bayern Munich, Barcelona, Liverpool, Manchester United into that competition, but they don't. FIFA seems to have made up some rules in advance, which people therefore knew the criteria for. Other rules seem to have been made up very much on the fly. And clearly here I'm referring to Inter Miami, who have now been knocked out of the playoffs in MLS. And as a result of that, nobody's going to care. It's a bit like if you got 4 teams going into the playoffs at home, nobody really cares in the championship whether you finish 3rd, 4th, 5th, or 6th. All that he cares is who won the final playoff match and who gets promoted. So nobody will ever recall the very convoluted vehicle through which FIFA have seemed to crowbar Inter Miami into this tournament. And it looks now as if Inter Miami could be one of the seeded teams in the competition, which means that they will play the first match potentially of the competition, because FIFA is increasingly desperate to get some traction and interest in this competition. If Lionel Messi gets an injury 4 weeks before the competition and has to miss it, I hate to think how they're going to react.
Well, the way FIFA are behaving, I think they'll just move the tournament. They'll just wait for him to get better, basically. So the Club World Cup does emulate the World Cup in one respect, in that it's going to take 4 weeks for basically the best two teams, i.e. Man City and Madrid, to probably get through to the final. As happened, the World Cup, it takes 4 weeks for one of the top 6 countries who will inevitably win it to do the same.
Yeah, although Croatia got to the World Cup final.
Yeah, fair point. Yeah,
2018, and sometimes the draw just works for you. We both supported teams that have made progress in cup competitions where you think, I've had more complicated routes to Wembley or getting close to Wembley than that. So, if just as we always recall when England are in a competition or the home nations are in a competition or whoever we happen to be supporting, after the first match, you're starting to already work. Well, if we finish second, that means we're playing the third team from that group or the winners of that group, and that's on the good. There's always a good half of the draw. I've never known a single tournament where there's a equal part of the draw in terms of the potential opponents.
Well, because as my old dad used to say, it's because FIFA are blowing on the balls, Kieran. They're making them warmer to make sure it's a fix. We're recording this on Thursday night, Kieran. Tomorrow, Friday, that's how good I am with days of the week, Kieran.
Yes.
Days of the week.
Wednesday.
Days of the week to me are like numbers to you. And you're absolutely right. It is Wednesday. You're quite right. You've rumbled me. The Premier League clubs are voting on amendments to the league's financial rules. And I don't know how they know, but several tabloid newspapers are reporting that this vote is too close to call. Although, having said that, Nick DeMarco, when he spoke to him, did say that every single Premier League club has somebody at it who seems to be intent on leaking important news to the press as quickly as they can. So that's obviously how it's happening. But do you agree? Is it too close to call this vote?
I think that's a fair assessment of where we are. We've had Naz Sawiris of Aston Villa has come out very much on Manchester City's side today. And I think the points that he's raised are valid ones. Although we have had the initial conclusions of the Commission in relation to Manchester City's case against the Premier League, we've not yet had the full detail. And without that, how can you vote on new rules if we don't know exactly what was the logistics behind, or the logic, should I say, behind the decision of the Commission to reach the conclusions that they made, and they said they do need more time to articulate that, then it does seem that the Premier League is acting with indecent haste. And again, looking at Sawiris' comments, they are along the lines of, if this vote goes against Manchester City, and if you take a look at the Commission's comments, there is a fair chance that Manchester City will litigate again. We are looking at a legal case that has run into many, many millions. That's on top of, Nick made reference to the Everton case, which was fairly clean in terms of the relatively narrow criteria on which Everton were being charged by the Premier League. That cost £5 million for 5 days. We've got the Manchester City 115 charges hearing taking place. I've got a separate little spreadsheet which I keep a record of how much Lord Panic would be earning if his alleged £10,000 an hour is actually being received. So if this show goes out on the Thursday, he will have earned £3.3 million, and that's one KC who will have juniors, and Manchester City have other KCs involved as well. So we could be talking somewhere in the region of £50 to £60 million in costs for the Premier League, £50 to £60 million in costs for Manchester City, and then the APT verdict. If it is as messy as it would appear to be the case, that could provoke further litigation. And as Sawiris has said, all of this money is being paid out in legal fees, and that comes out of the Premier League central coffers, and that has to be deducted before they divide the money between the 20 different clubs in the Premier League itself. So it's costing Crystal Palace money, it's costing Brighton money, it's costing Manchester United money, and nobody seems particularly confident that the new suggestions from the Premier League will actually be converted into a coherent set of rules that are not easy to challenge.
I'm going to tell Jimmy Carr that Lord Panic's charging more than he does, just to see his. I was going to say just to see his eyebrows raised, but he can't raise his eyebrows these days, to be perfectly honest. What is the reason for the haste then in trying to? It seems rush this vote through. It's only a few weeks since the vote. They can't have had time, as you say, to fully analyse and look at the details, which is exactly what analysing is. Of this, so it does seem unfair, and also with all the risks that incurs of a decision being made that again has to be reviewed in a year's time because they've rushed it through.
The fear is you could have a few clubs effectively take advantage of the vacuum as to where we are in relation to APT rules at this present moment in time, and say, right, we've signed a deal with an organisation, and the reason why there's so much of a fuss about it is that there's an accounting definition of something called a related party, and a related party is a much narrower set of individuals or corporations to which the club will be linked. APT very much expanded that because the fear, I think, of the Premier League, or certainly of the people who have been lobbying the Premier League to introduce these rules, is that Newcastle United would have a series of sponsorship arrangements organised with companies from Saudi Arabia who were not directly owned either by PIF or by Mohammed bin Salman. And on the back of that, Newcastle would have been able to raise significant extra revenues and therefore become more competitive in terms of what they could recruit in terms of the talent pool. The existing elite clubs do not want any more of a competitive Premier League than they already have. Manchester City added one to the pot. 5 into 4 doesn't go, 6 into 4 doesn't go in terms of Champions League places. And as we've seen in terms of the projections from UEFA this season, the winners of the Champions League will be probably earning in prize money alone up to 150 million euros. So getting there, whereas you might get 30 to 40 million euro if you win the Europa League. So it is such a sought after qualification. Why allow Newcastle to compete to make that 6 into 4 problem a 7 into 4 problem?
We were supposed to discuss this next story a bit later in the agenda, Kieran, but it makes perfect sense to do it now because there's speculation that any compensation claims that we've seen mentioned by 4 rival clubs could take years to settle if Manchester City do lose that 115 case charge.
Yes. At present, our understanding is that clubs have had tentative discussions with legal counsel, in effect, as to if Manchester City had a financial advantage during the period of which they've been accused of the charges, which is effectively 2009 to 2018. Does that mean that Manchester City have won trophies? Does that mean, more importantly, have Manchester City qualified for the Champions League, and therefore the side finishing 5th in many of those years has been denied the opportunity to play in the Champions League and has suffered financially as a result? So this is an intriguing one. If we take a look at precedent, there is a form of precedent relating to Carlos Tevez and West Ham in 2005 when Sheffield United were relegated on the last day of the season, ironically due to Tevez, I think, scoring a winning goal in another match. And that was an out-of-court settlement in the region of, we think, around about £20 million. Now, £20 million in 2005 was a lot of money. Compared to, and clearly it's not peanuts today, but compared to the growth in revenues that we've seen. So it would be a multiple of that. There's also a sort of precedent arising when Derby County made the playoffs of the EFL Championship in one of those years when they had the unusual amortisation policy. And what happened was that Middlesbrough pursued Derby County because when Derby County went into administration, and the administrators effectively again settled out of court, is our understanding. And that money, to be fair to Mel Morris, he paid the money rather than the administrators. But that was an out of court settlement to allow Derby to be then sold. Whether there was a similar payment made to Wycombe Wanderers, we've never managed to get an answer out of that. So there is some links historically, trying to prove that Manchester City have had enough of an advantage to have effectively nudged another club out of a trophy or Champions League qualification. I think there will be an awful lot of expert witness testimony, and there'll be an awful lot of gathering of evidence. So that's why it could take years.
Whole Foods Market has Thanksgiving gatherings covered. First things first, reserve your no antibiotics ever fresh whole turkey today, starting at $2.99 a pound. Or go with their organic spiral cut bone-in ham, full of seared-in flavor. For sides, choose Whole Foods Market grab-and-go platters. Go even further and get your whole meal catered. Just order online by November 26th. Get Thanksgiving ready at Whole Foods Market. Terms apply.
Looking for a pickup truck to get just about anything done? Look no further. The Chevy Silverado EV isn't just the most powerful Silverado ever, with next-level towing capability and technology. It also offers game-changing versatility with the available multi-flex midgate and tailgate, which means Silverado EV helps you carry large, bulky, and oddly shaped items up to nearly 11 feet in length. Chevrolet. Together, let's drive. Visit Chevrolet.com to learn more.
Obviously, Kieran, it beggars belief that it's a coincidence that 4 clubs on the same day decided they were going to seek compensation for Man City. So, do we know which of the 4 clubs are leading this? Is there one particular club that's trying to rally other clubs to their support here?
I'm not sure that it is one in particular. All that I do know from various conversations that have arisen with journalists is that Arsenal in particular have got a quite staggering degree of loathing towards Manchester City, which is, I guess, a bit surprising given that Arsenal sort of historically have been one of the clubs, if not the club, in the Premier League or the old First Division, who you always felt was somewhat had a bit above that type of thing. But that is not necessarily the case anymore because money is all that matters.
Well, talking of Arsenal money, Kieran, Arsenal fans may be delighted to hear that they're preparing to spend a lot of it, but not on players.
Yes, this is a potential expansion of the Emirates Stadium from the current capacity of 60,000 to around about 80,000. I think architecturally it would involve an awful lot of work, so it's going to be very expensive. If it's going to be very expensive for the club and the club's backers, then that significant expense is going to be passed on to fans. So if you are an Arsenal fan who is on a waiting list for a season ticket, I'll be perfectly honest, there ain't going to be many more tickets. If there's 20,000 extra tickets, there ain't going to be many more of those which will be going to season ticket holders because, as we've established on the show in recent months, you've served your usefulness to football. And what the club owners want are people who will come for the day. They will treat it in a similar vein to a trip to Disneyland or somewhere similar. And you effectively get to the ground, you empty out your wallet and you keep emptying out your wallet until the moment that you leave. There will also be a significant increase in the facilities offered to the hospitality sector because they're the people that pay the most. And this is not a footballing decision. This is not an improving the atmosphere decision. This is not making Arsenal more available to people from North London who are desperate to see their team. This is a purely fiscal decision. if Manchester United increase to 100,000, how do Arsenal keep up with Manchester United? So you are running to stand still when it comes to stadium capacity at the elite end. I think for clubs such as ours, can we manage an increase in capacity? Yes, we can. But I think we both know we're probably not. If Palace go up to 35,000, if Brighton go to 33, 34, you're probably around about your limit.
Yeah, I think any decision on whether or not Steve Parish builds a new stand may be on hold just for the moment, Kieran, just while we check that the league table isn't upside down, as certain Palace fans are claiming. The immediate vicinity around the Emirates, Kieran, is quite affluent. That part of North London, there are a lot of very, very big and expensive houses. So Chelsea will be looking at that and go, well, hang on a second, why is it considered impossible for us to expand in an affluent area when it appears that Arsenal are able to do so with relative ease?
Well, I think Arsenal have probably got an advantage in the sense that the Emirates Stadium is more modern, so there is the opportunity to build up and possibly also down. I don't know whether the stadium is above a tube line. I think that has been an issue potentially in relation to Chelsea. So that is one way of addressing the concerns. It would be done in sort of a Lego style, in the sense that you would do one stand, then the next and next. I think Chelsea's owners are very, very affluent compared to those of Arsenal. Chelsea's neighbours. And also, if you take a look at the land footprint that Arsenal have, they don't just have the stadium. There is also quite a bit of sort of room outside the immediate vicinity of the stadium where there is scope to be a bit more flexible.
You mentioned Manchester United, Kieran. We've seen them slightly defensive this week. Well, since Ratcliffe took over, they've been on the back foot a little bit, but they were defending record high executive box charges for the ultra VIP package, which puts this story into quite a sad perspective.
It's not a charity. Okay, because whenever I raise this subject on social media, I do get this constant response from a section of the Manchester United fan base. Not all. It has to be said, not all at all, because I think some of the more canny Manchester United fan base will realise that once they've cut all of the costs, the next thing they're going to do, they're going to start targeting you boys and girls that are in the Stretford end who make all the noise, just as it's the boys and girls in the Kop at Liverpool that make all the noise. Then they're coming after you in terms of they're going to try to extract more money from you. So this story is that it's not been finalised. Let's be fair there, but it was run in one of the newspapers that Manchester United currently contribute £40,000 a year to the Disabled Supporters Association, and fair play to the club for doing that. Because they don't have to do anything, but they're giving £40,000. So first of all, let's give credit where it is due. And the Disabled Supporters Association runs a number of events over the course of the year. Normally, gives an opportunity for fans to meet some former legends, to have dedicated events, and I think that's to be applauded. It now appears that as part of Ineos's a sort of root and branch review of all aspects on a line-by-line basis of assessing Manchester United, they have decided that they want to potentially halve that contribution from the club from £40,000 to £20,000. And then you say, well, okay, I wouldn't be particularly happy with that if I was a Manchester United fan. But if this is a universal approach being taken by Ineos and Jim Glazer, as I think I prefer to refer to him these days, is that also applying at the upper echelons of the club? And then I know somebody connected to the former coach, and it turns out that during the course of the summer, Manchester United, by all accounts, sent 3 senior members of staff from 3 different locations in 3 separate private aircraft to tell Erik ten Hag we're not going to sack you. We're going to extend your contract. And the cost of those 3 aircraft was £25,000. So you go, okay, so you want to save 20,000, but it's okay for the big wig stuff like. And then the decision they made has possibly cost Manchester United somewhere in the region of perhaps £6 to £8 million in additional compensation for extending the contract. So this does appear to be a classic case of penny wise and pound foolish, and also punching down rather than punching up. And we tried to give clubs as fair a hearing as possible, and we gave Manchester United a huge amount of praise for committing to the real living wage in Manchester, and I still applaud them for doing that. That was partly due to the fact that we moaned about it so much, but they have done some really good things, and this isn't one of them.
Man United are not a charity, Kieran, but Sainsbury's are not a charity. Southern Railway are not a charity. But if they were to introduce cost-cutting measures, if they were to say, look, we don't need a ramp at both ends of the platform or both sides of the shop, so we're going to get rid of one of them, people would be rightly horrified, and they could turn around and say, well, we've still got disabled access. It's just an expression you use a lot of. I think so many Man United fans will be disappointed that it's such a piddling amount of money. I was trying to think of a word that wasn't rude there. It's such a piddling amount of money in the great scheme of things, and yet it will have a tangible effect on the life of disabled supporters and their ability to go to football matches.
Yes, but as you say, Manchester United fans will be disappointed. Will they stop supporting Manchester United? No. Will they stop buying the merchandise? No. Will they stop trying to get hold of match tickets? No. And Ineos know this. They know that the loyalty of the fan base is such that you'd have to do something spectacularly wrong to stop a fan from supporting their club. What would it take for you to stop supporting Palace, or me to stop supporting Brighton? It would have to be something very, very seismic indeed. And rightly or wrongly, this does not appear on that particular scale to most fans.
Yeah, because of course most Palace fans will say, well, I support Palace, I don't support Steve Parish.
Yeah.
You'll be the same. Most Man United fans will say, well, I don't support Jim Ratcliffe, I support Man United.
Exactly.
Whoever. Yeah, and I think there's still an element of the honeymoon period with him. Is that he's not the Glazers, so he's still getting the benefit of the doubt. There'll be an upturn with the new manager if they end up, fifth this season rather than eighth or whatever it was last season. They'll be happy, and the disabled fans will fade into the background, unfortunately, which is it's not how it should be, Kieran. This next story about a company making a profit seems almost counterintuitive whenever they've been mentioned in the past, it's very much not in terms of them being successful.
That's right. This is a company called Venky's London Limited. It's the Blackburn Rovers parent company. And they made a profit of £1.8 million to the year end, the 31st of March 2024. They've got one person to thank for this profit, and that person is Steve Parish, because Blackburn Rovers selling Adam Wharton to Palace, and he was, I think he was an academy player, meant that they booked a profit of £20 million on that deal. And that turned them from making an 18 or 19 million pound loss into a 1.8 million pound profit. It shows the importance of academy development. It shows the importance of investing in youth. And Wharton, even as a Brighton fan, he's one of the players that we will be watching out for when we play you in a few weeks' time, because we know that he's a very promising player, and he's established himself in the squad quite easily. So it really did come down to that one transaction. And I think what we've seen with Blackburn is that they have started to use the player trading model in the past 2 or 3 years to convert pretty sizable operating losses, as we might describe them, into something which is more palatable. I think they sold, was it Armstrong to Southampton, then Wharton to you. They sold Sammy Smodic to Ipswich this summer. So that's a model which has worked really well for Celtic up in Scotland. They set themselves an acceptable level. In Celtic's case, it tends to be a very small loss, and then they make one big transaction in terms of a sale a year, and it's a really smart trading model. So you've got to give Blackburn some credit for that. But what happens if you go 2 years without selling a player? Then it is volatile. It is unpredictable way of managing the club.
It is a smart trading model. It's one that Palace relied on for 2 decades, pretty much, before our current, in inverted commas, success. But the purchase of Wharton did initiate a big discussion amongst Palace fans, is because we've got a Category A academy. And Steve Parish is rightly banging the drum constantly about the Category A academy. But the best young player we've got, we paid £20 million for from another club. So it seems it seems one of these things is not working in this situation. It's like, why have we got this really expensive academy when we're still not turning out our own players and having to buy young players from other clubs?
Yeah, I can understand that. In Parish's defence, and those are 3 words I never thought I would say in a sentence, Palace have only relatively recently transformed from Category 2 to Category 1 academy, and it does take it does take a development period of time to get the benefits.
Well, if Steve Parish is listening to this, I hope he will take consolation in the fact that I spent 2 hours in Brighton defending him the other night.
You did,
yes. In a game of verbal tennis, which I was always going to win, Kieran. I'm a professional.
You impressed everybody the way you took it all on, and you gave an Ilie Nastase type of response.
I did want to say to the nice policeman chap when he was being very funny, but it's my job. I'm always going to be funnier than he is, to be honest. Just as he's always going to be better at organising the policing at away games than I am. This next story has a Palace link as well, and I think in other weeks this probably would have been the biggest story because it says a lot about French football and their attitude to debt, for one thing. But Olympique Lyonnais, owned by John Textor, part owner of Crystal Palace, have got to cough up a lot of money in order to avoid relegation, Kieran.
Yes, I think a few people are now looking at John Textor and wondering, is there all fur coat and no knickers situation arising in relation to him? And the reason for this is that he owns, clearly, Olympique Lyonnais. He owns, Botafogo in Brazil. He owns 45% of Palace. And he makes an awful lot of noise. He didn't make an awful lot of noise when the Eagle Football Group, which is his effectively his MCO, that announced losses of 422 million last season. Also, I've been on to Company's House to do a bit of Textor detective work. And he's got a company called Eagle Football Holdings based here in the UK, as well as Eagle Football Bidco and Eagle Football Midco. And you'll be familiar with those names from the status or the nature of the Crystal Palace setup. And all of those clubs are late with their accounts. All those companies are late with their accounts. And again, it's just little red flags are starting to arise. He's been very bombastic in terms of, this is a misunderstanding. We've been demoted 2 leagues, but it won't actually happen in reality, and there's an opportunity for an appeal, and so on. Why don't you just go and pay people on time, John? And this issue would not have arisen in the first place. So you do wonder whether there's, is there some robbing Peter to pay Paul type of activity taking place, and they're effectively they do have a more significant financial challenge than perhaps people had initially thought. And one of the solutions there is for him to sell his shares in Palace, but it's a case of then are the other shareholders in a position to buy them from him, or does he have to go to a third party?
There are 2 questions I'd like to ask you, Kieran. First of all, can you explain the French rule which has been triggered, this idea that he can basically buy his way out of relegation if possible? And secondly, these debts have not appeared overnight. So why was he able to be so bullish about buying Everton when it seems he was very close to buying Everton? Why was that able to happen when he must have known that he had these huge debts that he couldn't pay in France? So was that all a giant tire-kicking exercise? Was that hot air, or is he simply confident that he would have found enough people to give him money to buy Everton?
I'm not being rude here. I think Everton would have been seen as a step up in terms of size of fan base, size of stadium, and so on. So it would have been a more expensive acquisition than Crystal Palace, but also potentially he would have been able to borrow money on the basis of having this brand new shiny stadium, which is now being completed. Remember 777 partners, they got very close to acquiring Everton Football Club. And earlier in the show, we were not particularly kind to the Premier League in terms of the way that they've conducted themselves with the Manchester City case. Everton fans, I know, don't like the Premier League, but if it had not been for the Premier League putting hurdle after hurdle after hurdle in front of 777, Everton could be in a far worse position than they currently find themselves. And I think people are a bit disappointed that we're getting no white smoke coming out of Everton in terms of the acquisition by the Friedkin Group. I thought people had hoped that we'd have made more progress on that than appears to be the case as we lie today. So, yeah, in terms of Textor and the French rules, there is a sort of a French gendarmerie of a fiscal nature who does the investigations. There have been demotions before, but if you manage to put together a cohesive and comprehensive defence and say it was a short-term cash flow issue, then they may either quash the demotion in total, or they might diminish it, which is effectively like all appeals. You try to put together some form of defence.
So would you say that they've got a more robust approach to us then in the Premier League or in the EFL towards owners who accumulate debts?
Yes, I mean the reason for the demotion is due to parties not being paid. So to be fair, we have seen the EFL come down very heavily on those clubs that have made late payments to HMRC and late other payments in terms of points deductions. There is an ongoing problem in English football in that the Premier League could not demote a team to League One or League Two because it's got no power over how the EFL controls itself. And we've had all this talk about regulator and lack of governance within football. When you've got three governing bodies, that causes problems. So one of the conclusions I'm reaching more frequently is the creation of the Premier League in 1990 to lead to the actual formation of the league as a formal entity in 1992 has been a step forward as far as English football is concerned. And there was a need to kick some of the more dinosaur-like mentality owners into touch, and the Premier League effectively, the application of the Taylor Report, the decision to have TV, and the likes of David Dean, who I think were very visionary. Remember, before the Premier League, there was still a lot of suspicion directed towards television. If we show matches live on television, then fans won't turn up and we end up losing money. It's proven to be the opposite. Those issues no longer exist in 2024. So do we need a separate Premier League and EFL? If you have one body acting on behalf of all 92 teams, listening to all 92 teams, then if a Premier League club had committed a very significant offence, you could say it's going to be 2 divisions down, it's going to be 3 divisions down, and so on. And that's what the Premier League can't do.
My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/campaign to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
With Lululemon, the real gift happens when they're living in it. When you give the fan favorite Everywhere belt bag, the real gift is And when the ultra-soothing Rest Feel slides are the gift, you're really giving them... This holiday, Lululemon makes it easy to give little luxuries that go beyond. Open the moment. Shop now at Lululemon.com.
You're in one of your romantic, dreamy moods again, aren't you? One body to run the whole of English football, Kieran. What are you
bloody communist.
I've not seen a lot of football, I have to say, Kieran, in the Women's Championship. But here's a story which might change that next season.
Yes. What has happened is that under present legislation, as we know, you are not permitted to bring alcohol into an area in which you can physically view the game. So therefore, if you want to have a pint, then you've got to do it on the concourses. And some people say that is costing clubs money in terms of lost catering income. It's taking some of the enjoyment away from football. And certainly, I go to non-league matches if I'm not watching Brighton, and the legislation only goes down, I think, as far as Tier 5, so effectively to National League level. If I go and watch Lewis or Haywards Heath or a club such as that, you can drink on the terraces, and people do. Now, it's got to be said that there is a quite relaxed vibe at these clubs, especially at Lewis. It's only, it's the hipsters' hipsterville. One of the questions I think was directed towards PC Darren last Friday was, is he in favour of alcohol returning to the terraces? And he said, I've got to be honest, the jury is out. And he pointed to what happened. And I was at Brighton's away fixtures in the Europa League last season. And when Brighton scored, everybody thought it was hilarious to throw their beer in the air and cover everybody else with it. And I just think it's a bit dickish myself, especially if you've got children there. If I'm there with the Baroness, you just want to go home smelling of cheap lager. So you can see that there has to be an element of trust involved. So what we've now got is in the Championship. It looks like 4 clubs. I can't remember the names of the clubs, but in the Women's Championship, there's going to be an experiment to see, can we have people drinking in view of the pitch, and will people behave themselves? And I do think that we as individual fans and collectively as fans, if we really want this, we've got to buy in this by saying, if you're going to be a complete bellend and start throwing your beer around because you're a bit of a lad and you think it's hilarious, then you're actually probably turning away other fans who won't be enjoying the matchday experience as much.
I thought it was very interesting when PC Darren was asked about alcohol in football, because he did say that was pretty much the biggest issue, was the throwing of the beer, that the correlation between kickoff times and trouble, he said, it's increasingly diminishing. And there are other social issues that fans are taking part in as well. But I find this is not just at Palace, it's at other grounds I've been to and other teams. There's a lot of fans, probably I'd say 20% of fans who will finish their beer before they go back to their seat. And that could be halfway through the second half. So I think a lot of clubs are going to say, well, they're drinking anyway. We don't care whether they're watching the game. If they're still spending money in the bar at the time, we don't. I know technically they're not supposed to be buying drinks after a certain amount of time, but there's not many clubs in the country that will stick to those rules. Yeah,
I've been to Twickenham on a few occasions to watch.
Yeah,
and I know you disapprove. It's not a ball. I agree with you. It's not a ball. It's not a ball shaped. I've been to Twickenham on a few occasions, and the one thing that I noticed there, because you can drink, I actually spend half of the time standing up and sitting down because somebody wants to go and get 4 pints or 6 pints. And because they've gone and got 4 pints or 6 pints, 10 minutes later, they need to go for a waz.
Yeah.
And therefore you have to stand up again. So you're up and down like a jack in the box, which isn't. You're there to watch the sport rather than constantly be moved around.
Well, this is a bugbear of mine, and it has been ever since I did a 5 Live report on a Twickenham game, which is a long. I think I was there for about 4 hours. It seemed longer. I mean, days had gone by. Well, that might just have been watching the game, to be perfectly honest. But we had an interview with the police controller, who said, their scope also included Brentford and QPR. He said he'd much rather do a football game than he said the behaviour of the rugby fans was much worse, but they were told to turn a blind eye when older men, probably doctors and lawyers, were urinating on people's lawns because they weren't football fans. So they were.
It's hijinks, Kevin.
It's hijinks. These are people that are in for the rest of the year are responsible individuals bringing money in for the economy, and if they want to let off a bit of steam, then that's fine. But the fact that he admitted that they were told not to use the same rules that they would do with a football fan, because there were two blokes pissing in someone's garden. I said, mate, come on, mate, this is happening while I was interviewing him. It's like if they were football fans, they'd have been in the back of a van straight away. It's just don't get me started. I don't know how many times I have to say this, Kieran, that we don't get to mention some teams a lot, but when we do finally get to mention them, it's because they've got a problem. And we have 2 teams in Scotland that fulfil that criteria, unfortunately. And the first one is Dumbarton.
That's right. Dumbarton have entered administration. Now, when this story first started to circulate, my first reaction was, let's go to Companies House and let's just check on their accounts, because they weren't on my naughty step. And if I take a look at Dumbarton's most recent accounts, cash in the bank, had made a profit overall, it seemed relatively solid. But there was one thing that stuck out, and that was that somebody owed Dumbarton an awful lot of money. And it would appear that that debt has not been paid. There are stories circulating, and we cannot confirm nor deny that as far as Dumbarton were concerned, there were issues relating to property assets. Now, I don't know whether the property asset has been sold and the money's not gone to the club, or there's a complication in relation to property. And I've not seen it in the newspapers or the BBC website, so I'm loath to say anything. Dumbarton have set up a GoFundMe page to try to provide sufficient cash resources to allow the administration to move on forwards. There will be an automatic penalty. I think it's a 9-point penalty in Scottish football. So this will hit the club. It's not a club which gets big crowds, but it is a club that gets crowds. And the only reason why I know Dumbarton exists as a town, is through the very fact that it has a football club. And this is what we talk about on a regular basis. Football clubs provide identity for individual towns and villages and cities and so on. And that's why there's a case for saying that they deserve some form of protection.
Very historical area, Kieran, in certainly for the Scottish. Obviously, it's in Scotland, but you're quite right. When we were growing up, most of our knowledge of Scottish geography came from football team names. But as Scottish football teams have much better names than we tend to have, and they don't always relate to the town that they're actually in, your geography could be all over the place. I'm intrigued, Kieran, and slightly concerned to hear that there's a club that didn't feature anywhere on your list of clubs to worry about that are suddenly out of the blue. Because I think that will get... there are a lot of people who listen to this and they scan Twitter for your list of stories and they go, oh, my club's not on it. That's good. But now it seems that out of nowhere, a club could be on it with... If you don't know, Kieran, that's genuine. And I have to say, when we saw Neil Doncaster, the head honcho of Scottish football, and there were 1 or 2 issues. We talked about potential problems down the line. Dumbarton wasn't on anybody's list of talking points. When I was in Edinburgh earlier this year talking to a couple of Scottish football fans, Dumbarton again wasn't on anyone's list of things to worry about. So the fact that it seems that we've got things to worry about that we don't know about, that's worrying.
You're absolutely right. Part of the problem when trying to do an analysis and assessment of a business from the accounts is that you're looking in a rearview mirror. And if you're looking in the rearview mirror, you can't necessarily see that there's an iceberg up ahead of you. With the benefit of hindsight, I can see that my initial assessment, which I think the majority of analysts would have also reached, would be this club seems to be in fine fettle. But knowing what we know now in terms of monies owing to the club apparently not being paid, trying to work out how those people are. But the numbers did stick out a bit in terms of the quantum of the figures. So perhaps I should have spotted it. But I'm reviewing 140 clubs, and
of course,
it comes in, looks okay, it moves on.
Wouldn't it be a terrible thing if it turned out that Captain Smith on the Titanic was actually looking in the rearview mirror while some little lad up in the thing says, "Sir, I think you did." No, just seeing what's behind me. So there's no way of finding out through Companies House who the people are that. So obviously it's an unpaid debt to them that has caused them the problem. So it must be a substantial amount of money. So, but there's no way of knowing the exact amount or who it's owed by.
I think it's somebody, it's either the owner or connected to the owner. It looks as if the directors have put the club into administration.
Oh, okay.
So
that's interesting.
If that is the case, that's very disappointing to hear.
Well, as ever, of course, if anybody from the club is listening or any fans are listening, they want to get in touch and talk to us, we'll, of course, be very interested. I was going to say we'd love to hear from you. We wouldn't. Of course we wouldn't. We'd love never to hear from you again, to be perfectly honest, but we would be interested to hear from you. And talking of romantic Scottish names, Kieran, Bonnyrigg Rose, a relatively new Scottish team, has got a fantastic name, but they've also been hit with the most bizarre point deduction. Yes,
Bonnyrigg Rose, who were promoted to the SPFL in 2022, and they formerly had somebody playing with them called Sean Connery.
Indeed.
Who went on to other things, I think it's fair to say. They have been given a 6 points deduction because their pitch slopes too much. And I think when they were promoted to the SPFL, there were two issues that the club wanted to address. One of those was to have an artificial pitch because they wanted to offer more facilities to the local community, and the second was, and it was on the list. It's a bit like me cleaning out the garage. It's not I don't want to do it. It's just that I've got a long list, and it's not the top, and other things tend to take precedence. So the second one was to address the issue of the sloping pitch at this particular tier of Scottish football, and it looks as if the Scottish FA have now run out of patience, and they've given the club a point penalty, which seems harsh. To have made the progress that it has made into getting into the SPFL, but we saw this with English clubs going from the National League to League Two, and I think our view is a bit the same as we would have with this case with Bonnyrigg Rose. If you've made all of that effort and you've made that incredible achievement, then there must be something in the rules, surely, to give you a bit more flexibility to transition from where you are now to have full compliance with the rules.
You'd like to think so, Kieran, but also you'd like to think in the way that FIFA should have spotted there were two clubs owned by the same people in their tournament, which is not allowed, that somebody at Bonnyrigg Rose would have been standing in the centre circle in the last 10 years or so going, you might have to do something about this. The ball keeps rolling down to it. We need to resolve this issue. But what happens if they don't resolve? Do they keep getting a 6 point deduction every time? Because it strikes me, Kieran, that it's going to be a very expensive thing to do to rectify a sloping pitch, because it's going to obviously, it means the whole pitch will have to be taken up. There need to be work to level everything out. The pitch has got to be going down. Will they have time to do that in the summer when the season's not happening? It's going to be a lot of, if they're going to combine that with having an artificial pitch, then fair enough, that will bring some money in the future. But for a club at their level of football, this is a kind of game changer in the terms of the finances, isn't it?
Yes, it's one of those things which is frustrating. But as you rightly say, the actual cost involved might have been that we'll deal with the artificial pitch first and we'll deal with the slope second, or they didn't think that the Scottish FA were that serious about the breach of rules.
I don't know anybody at Bonnyrigg Rose, Kieran, but I'm sure they're sensible people. They wouldn't plan just to put an artificial pitch down on the slope, would they?
Yeah, that strikes me. Well, because it will roll even further, the ball, won't it? If it's an artificial pitch.
Unless it's Velcro, then it won't roll at all.
Oh, yeah,
could do that.
Yeah.
The holidays are back at Starbucks, and there's so much to share. With classics like Caramel Brulee Latte, Peppermint Mocha, and Chestnut Praline Latte, we're celebrating everyone's flavor of festivity. Order yours in the app.
I'm going to hold my hands up here, Kieran, this last story. This is the first story in 5 years of doing this pod where I have not heard of the club in question. And I'm slightly ashamed of that because this is not... I hadn't heard of the Costa Rican club you mentioned earlier, which I think there are circumstances that allow me to get away with that. But this club, and it's in English football, and I have not heard of it. Unfortunately, it's bad news for them.
It is. I suspect 99.9% of listeners will not have heard of West Allotment Celtic, who play in the Northern League, and they're based on Tyneside. They've been going for over 90 years. So, just like I'm proud to have played for a cricket club that was set up in 1922. So, my old cricket club going for over a century. You do have that bit of civic pride, and rightly so. But unfortunately, they've lost their main sponsor. There was a sort of a bit of a dig at the local fan base in that we'd made progress on the pitch, but we were unable to transition that into higher attendances. Lost their main sponsor. They're effectively cashless. And what the Northern League have said is that rather than wind up the club, we're going to suspend you for 2 weeks. So therefore you don't have money going out in terms of player costs and match hosting costs and so on, to give you enough time to try to turn this round. But it's not going to be easy. And you can understand it. Times are tough for us all. You've got 3, at least, senior clubs in the northeast. Newcastle are doing fantastically well. Middlesbrough are doing pretty well, and Sunderland are doing fantastically well. Getting people to therefore go to see a Northern League match when there's the opportunity to see the other big teams in the area, either live or on television, is a factor which makes it that much more difficult to drive fans to attend a match at this level. And non-league football, I cannot stress enough, it's great fun. Offering people out in the car park after a game when you see 2 players clash on it. There's stuff there which takes us back to those nostalgic days when football was a bit different.
We know the North East, Kieran, is a hotbed. I was trying to think of a word other than hotbed because it's a terrible cliche, but it is a hotbed of football. We know it's not just those 3 massive clubs. I mean, you've got the likes of Blythe Spartans, who we've been talking about recently. You've got Gateshead, you've got Darlington, you've got all sorts of other teams up there. You've got Durham Ladies, who are force in women's football. This is one of those occasions when you think it shouldn't be beyond the wit of Newcastle, Sunderland and Middlesbrough to have a little meeting and say, come on, lads, 10 grand each will keep West Allotment Celtic going for a long, long time. And that's good for the region. It's not just good for West Allotment Celtic. It's good for football in general. It's good for the mental well-being of people in the North East. That should be able to happen. Because I'm going to research West Allotment Celtic. I just love the idea that 90 years ago they had such civic pride that they decided to bung the name Celtic in there. They've got the most prosaic name possible. Well, it's the West Allotment. I tell you what, that's United. No, Celtic. West Allotment Celtic. So we say this every time there's a club in trouble, Kieran. For the 30, 40, 50, 200, I don't know how many people go to see West Allotment Celtic on a regular basis. This is causing them sleepless nights as much as Man United being in administration is causing millions of people across the globe. So it's a story we need to keep an eye on. And again, if anybody from West Allotment Celtic would like to talk to us, or if there's any way we can help spread the news that you need money, then let us know and we will happily do that. But the game's awash with money, Kieran. No club at any level should be going out and business for the sake of however much this is. Thank you to everyone who's donated to the pod via our Patreon page. If you'd like to make a small monthly contribution to the pod as well, and that will get you access to our chat community and our regular quizzes, Christmas coming up, then you can do that by going to patreon.com/priceoffootball. But we are on the verge of announcing that big news for all of you out there. You're going to be getting so many more goodies, Kieran. So many more things coming your way for barely any money at all. So you might want to listen out for that. We will be announcing the date of the Christmas quiz on our next show. So excited. If you've got a question you'd like answered on our regular questions pod, then email us at questions@priceoffootball.com. Don't forget you can follow us on Twitter X, and you can find us on our YouTube channel. And if you'd like to buy our book, which is just out in paperback, which features a team called West Park Rovers, Kieran, which... With hindsight, we should have called it West Allotment Celtic. That would have been fantastic. You can find details on our website, priceoffootball.com, or you can get yourself down to a local bookshop if you're lucky enough to have one. We'll be back on Tuesday. What day of the week is it?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah, Tuesday, yes. We'll be back on Tuesday with our regular questions pod. In the meantime, I shall hand you over to Mr. Kieran Maguire for his customary farewell.
Well, as always, thank you to everybody on Patreon. Yes, keep your diaries in mid-December open. We will be confirming the date on our next show, and it's always good fun just to put names to faces and faces to names.
Yeah,
and we'll be going through our normal list of questions, and Kevin will be hosting in his inimitable way after a good 15 rounds with the Brighton fan base. I think you're up for more of this, aren't you? I can tell.
Yeah, maybe we'll give it a year. It was hardly Paul v Tyson, was it? Really? Well, I don't know who I am in that situation, to be perfectly honest. Yes, I'll be full of myself, and I'm going to Prague for the weekend, Kieran.
Yes. Brilliant.
We're watching. There's a big group of us going. Not a stag do. One of them's 93, as I keep pointing out. But we're going to see Sparta Prague on Saturday. And then we've got ourselves tickets for the young lad, Mark Aegis, who loves this pod. He loves a spreadsheet more than you do, Kieran. So he's organised everything. It's just fantastic. When you got one person in a WhatsApp group who went, no, I'll book all the tickets. I was all
wow.
He said, well, it's the big Prague derby on Sunday. It's Bohemians versus Dukla. Perhaps we should get tickets for that. And we all went, well, how are we going to get tickets? We're not going to get tickets for the big Prague derby. And he emailed the club in question. I think it's Bohemians at Home, who just went, just turn up on the day, be fine. He said, well, can we get seats together? We went, there ain't that many seats, to be perfectly honest. It's pretty much all standing. You can stand together by all means. So yeah. Oh, and also, of course, hunting down a Dukla Prague away kit if possible.
Of course.
And I can't. The last time I mentioned this, I had about 10 tweets from people in various parts of the Czech Republic who were only too happy to help me locate a Dukla Prague away kit because apparently the Dukla Prague club shop is legendarily inefficient. I was told by a lot of people, don't try going to the club shop; it'll be shut. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
The price of football. The price of football.